2015, the year WWE tried everything in their power to get Lex Reigns. Oh, I did it again. Sorry, let's try that once more. 2015 was the year that WWE tried everything in their power to take Roman Reigns from being the big dog to the very top dog, stacking the odds against him and pushing him hard in the face of an audience that desired other talent in the headline position. Despite the backlash, Reigns usually produced the goods between the ropes and was one of many that helped the year be a pretty damn good one, at least when it came to where it really matters, on pay-per-view. Reigns, along with former Shield mates Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, as well as John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, Cesaro, Kevin Owens and Daniel Bryan were consistently fantastic and were each responsible for countless cracking contests from January through December. In a year where the company had to deal with explicit pictures being leaked and explicit phone calls being unearthed, it was imperative that their major shows served as a distraction from unsavory outside-the-ring antics. But just how do the events stack up? Which pay-per-views knocked it out of the park, and which ones weren't even worth your $9.99 a month? I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and this is every WWE pay-per-view of 2015 ranked from worst to best. Join us. Number 13, Survivor Series. The 2015 edition of Survivor Series was certainly newsworthy, but remember, newsworthy does not necessarily mean good. Like, I could bring you the news that today my cat decided to be sick in one of my shoes. It's a thing that happened, but it hasn't exactly made me happy. Survivor Series 2015 wasn't as miserable as a shoe full of vomit, but it didn't boast any classic matches, and the booking left fans and even some WWE legends questioning the value of the product. Going into the show, the main storyline was centered around the vacant WWE title, which belonged to Seth Rollins until he suffered a major knee injury during a European tour. At Survivor Series, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Alberto Del Rio, and Kevin Owens collided in the semi-finals of a tournament to crown a new champion. Both Reigns vs Del Rio and Ambrose vs Owens were decent enough and set up a finals match between the Big Dog and the Lunatic Fringe that really should have been much better. Reigns won, but his celebrations were short-lived as he quickly relinquished the title to Sheamus, the Celtic Warrior cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase. Outside of the WWE title tournament, the other major attraction was a tag match celebrating 25 years of The Undertaker, who debuted at the 1990 show. The Brothers of Destruction completely squashed the Wyatt family in a match that was a disappointing end to a wasteful feud. Of the other matches, Tyler Breeze vs Dolph Ziggler was forgettable, Charlotte and Paige's Divas title match was so-so, and the men's traditional Survivor Series elimination tag match was unremarkable. Number 12, Royal Rumble. Oh boy, this one. The 2015 Royal Rumble is a show that will go down in history for all the wrong reasons, as it was full of poor performances and rotten booking, and only saved thanks to a superlative WWE title match. Since it's the only bright spot, let's start with that. The triple threat match between Brock Lesnar, John Cena, and Seth Rollins was perhaps the best triple threat match ever, and in the eyes of many, WWE's best match of the entire year. The match told a compelling story centered around trying to stop the unstoppable Lesnar, featured an array of breathtaking moves and sequences, and kept the enthused crowd guessing right up to the finish. Just top stuff from everyone involved here. Leading up to the match, however, there was nothing to get the heart racing. The Ascension versus the New Age Outlaws, the Usos versus the Miz and Mizdow, the Bellas against Paige and Natalya, three matches that wouldn't look out of place on your average house show. As for the Royal Rumble match itself, well, outside of a couple of surprise entrants like Bubba Ray Dudley and DDP, there was nothing to get excited about there either. This was the Roman Reigns show, back when WWE were giving him the full-on Luger 2.0 push, despite the fact that the fans simply weren't having it, and still, especially on this night, wanted constant favourite Daniel Bryan to come out on top. Roman set an elimination record in the match with 12 in total, besting Kane's record that had stood since 2001. The Big Red Machine was one of the men eliminated by the Big Dog in the match, but the truth was the field was full of no-hopers, and there were only a couple of viable winners. When Reigns finally won by last eliminating Rusev, the backlash was instant. Not even an appearance by The Rock, the most popular man in the entire world, could satiate an audience that were out for blood. Reigns' triumph was a bad booking decision, capping off a bad match at the end of a wretched show. My advice, seek out the WWE title match and leave the rest where it belongs. Number 11, Fastlane. Well, after the Royal Rumble fiasco, it couldn't exactly get much worse. WWE's first pay-per-view since that fateful night in Philadelphia, Fastlane attempted to right some wrongs on the road to WrestleMania, but you couldn't necessarily call it a successful endeavor. The main event, with Roman Reigns putting his WrestleMania main event opportunity on the line against Daniel Bryan, was a thriller, but the outcome again angered fans who wanted the Yes Man to win and face Brock at WrestleMania. Rusev and Cena's US title match was another good one and set up a showdown at the Showcase of the Immortals, and the tag team title match between the Usos and Tyson Kidd and Cesaro was high energy and ended in a well-deserved win for Kidd and Cesaro. Elsewhere, Triple H and Sting had a face-to-face confrontation to continue their program. The opening six-man of Ryback, Dolph Ziggler, and Eric Rowan taking on Seth Rollins, Kane, and The Big Show, viewed out of context years later, looks like a computer generated it at random, but it was fine for what it was. Not so good were Paige and Nikki Bella's Divas title match or Ambrose and Bad News Barrett's IC effort. And Stardust and Goldust had a seriously unsatisfactory match that derailed their chances of taking their feud to the grandest stage. Luckily, they'd have much better luck many years later with different gimmicks and in a new promotion. Fastlane 2015 was a show that didn't need to happen, but did anyway. The action was alright, but the crowd were dead for most of it and the finishes were poor, adding to the overwhelming sense of disappointment. Number 10, Extreme Rules. How can a show that has people crashing through tables, jumping off steel cages, and a man kissing another man on the bare backside be, well, boring? There was a lot happening at Extreme Rules, with multiple unique gimmick matches on offer, but after you've watched it, you get the feeling that a night on the bingo would have been just as exhilarating. The best bout of the evening went to Roman Reigns and Big Show, the two polarizing superstars putting it all on the line in a brutal last man standing match. Show really gave his body to aid Operation Get Roman Over Here. The New Day rolled over workhorses Tyson Kidd and Cesaro, who had been enjoying a decent run with the belts. And just how odd is it seeing our favorite pancake-eating preachers getting go-away heat around this time, by the way? How times change. Times may change, but some things are a constant, and one of those is Vince and company's obsession with arse kissing. Sheamus and Ziggler's Kiss Me Arse match was high-stakes stuff for sure, and the match itself was good. The stakes were also very high in the main event, a cage match between WWE champion Seth Rollins and Randy Orton. The cage match was just alright, nothing memorable, and the same could be said for the Cena-Rusev Russian chain match and the Ambrose-Harper Chicago street fight. Good for background viewing, Extreme Rules 2015 doesn't provide anything to grip you, but there's not a lot to gripe about either. Number 9, Night of Champions. Night of Champions 2015 will be remembered as the place where professional wrestling legend Sting had his last ever match. It wasn't supposed to be that way, but an injury suffered in his main event WWE title match with Seth Rollins meant he was forced to retire months later. And what a shame, because Sting was having a great match, putting forth an incredible effort and doing things like a top rope dive to the floor or taking a bump through the announce table that no 55-year-old should really be doing. The injury was unfortunate and it was a very scary sight to watch at the time and not knowing if he was okay, but Steve Borden can be proud of his performance and the match. If nothing else, it was a high note to go out on. Before that match, Rollins was in action for a first time, dropping the US title to John Cena in another grand encounter. Earlier in the show, the Dudley Boys had their first WWE pay-per-view match in a decade, a solid showing against the New Day. Braun Strowman made his WWE pay-per-view debut, teaming with Wyatt family members Bray and Harper to battle Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, and Chris Jericho. This was well worked, but like many of the night's undercard matches, it ended with a dissatisfying finish. Elsewhere, two titles changed hands as Kevin Owens beat Ryback for the IC title, and Charlotte Flair overcame Nikki Bella for the Divas title, her first belt on the main roster, and ending Nikki's record-breaking 301-day reign. I'm sure that Flair kid will end up doing just fine for herself. Number 8, Payback. WWE's May 2015 pay-per-view presentation, Payback, didn't bestow any title changes or major storyline developments on viewers, but it was a good, honest wrestling show, and watching these things long after the fact, that's all I really ask for. Kicking things off, Dolph Ziggler and Sheamus showcased their chemistry again, and thankfully, nobody had to kiss anyone's ass at the end of it. The New Day then retained their tag team titles against Cesaro and Kidd in a best 2 out of 3 falls match that could have easily been a best 6 out of 10 falls for my liking. heartbreaking. The card took a bit of a dip with Ryback and Bray Wyatt, but perked up and then some with John Cena and Rusev's I Quit match. This ended up being sort of like a Michael Bay film, long, full of explosions and cartoony action, and really quite bad, but also kind of good in a way. Oh, and do not at me, I will not be reading the comments section. The Naomi and Tamina versus Bella Twins and Neville versus King Barrett matches were both just padding, but the main event was serious meat and potatoes stuff. Seth Rollins defended his WWE title in a four-way with Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, and Randy Orton. Not only that, but if Rollins had lost, then Corporate Kane would have lost his role as Director of Operations, so the stakes really couldn't have been higher here. This was stuffed with finishers, mid-match turns, interference from Kane and J&J Security, and built until somehow the Architect was able to escape with the title by the skin of his teeth. A great match capping off an enjoyable show that still holds up. Number 7, TLC. TLC was WWE's last show of 2015, and they had some making up to do after the horror show that was Survivor Series. A triple threat tag team ladder match for the tag team titles is a good way to start as any, and with the Usos, New Day, and the Lucha Dragons in there, the likelihood was that it would be an innovative and high-flying affair. And it was indeed a fast-moving and awe-inspiring match that never once stopped to take a breath. The peak was Kalisto's amazing Salida del Sol from the top of one ladder through another. That deserves to be shown on the highlight reel for decades to come. After that frantic beginning, something slower was needed. Enter Ryback and Rusev, who had the match that you would expect from those two. Although I'm not sure I'll ever stop laughing at the big guy hitting an actual missile dropkick. Alberto Del Rio and Jack Swagger's US title chairs match was also par for the course from them. The bloated and balding corpse of ECW was resurrected once again for an 8-man elimination tag team tables match, the Dudleys teaming with Rhino and Tommy Dreamer to take on the Wyatt family. It was about as pretty as the love child of the Bushwhackers and the Nasty Boys, but there was plenty of violence, and if you like people going through plywood, you'll no doubt enjoy it. The match also brought back the old cheese grater to the crotch spot, which I believe used to be the calling card of George Hackenschmidt way back when. Up next was some good stuff with Owens and Ambrose for the IC title, two blokes who love to talk smack and love to fight on a show called Tables, Ladders and Chairs, a recipe for a great time. Unfortunately, and it's a shame, but there wasn't an added stipulation since these two lads could have used it, and let's not mention the feud had started because of thrown popcorn. And in the main event, Sheamus toppled Reigns in a bruising TLC match that probably would have come across a lot better in front of a more, appreciative crowd. No, Reigns wasn't quite the big babyface star they wanted him to be by the end of the year, but they kept on going anyway. Blasting Triple H with a chair and then putting him through an announce table after the match was certainly one way to go about getting those sweet and elusive cheers. Number 6, Battleground. Just missing out on the top 5 is Battleground, another very good wrestling show with not too much to crow about and a selection of fine matches to sample. Out first was hometown boy Randall Keith taking on an invigorated Sheamus in a spirited scrap that ended in the only possible way it could do, with an RKO out of nowhere. Where is nowhere anyway? And why do RKOs keep coming from there? Is it a town in St. Louis? Nowhere accurately describes where the primetime players, the WWE Tag Team Champions, were going, and fast. In fact, you can feel free to hit fast forward for their successful defense against the New Day. Things picked up nicely in the Roman Reigns vs Bray Wyatt match, a good look at the future of WWE's main event scene. This was a grand endeavor by both and would have looked right in place at the top of the bill. The triple threat match between Brie Bella, Charlotte and Sasha Banks, making her main roster pay-per-view debut, was smooth as silk and a good indicator of the opportunities that were going to be presented to WWE's long-suffering women going forward, as they were given time to tell their story and showcase their abilities. John Cena's great year continued with another startling match with Kevin Owens. The prize fighter had beaten Cena previously at Elimination Chamber and took him once more to the limit at Money in the Bank, making a strong statement to the WWE Universe in the process. But he obviously didn't know too much about John Cena, a man who has bought houses thanks to his incredible capacity to rise above hate and never give up. This was a fantastic match and really had the crowd rocking by the end of it. The main event WWE title match between Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins also had the potential to be great, but it needed an extra 5 or 10 minutes to really get there. The Undertaker stopped that from happening, making his first appearance since WrestleMania to kick Brock Lesnar right in his next big things. It was an intriguing way to close the show and whet the appetite for more confrontations between the Conqueror and the Dead Man. Don't worry, we'll get there shortly. Number 5, Elimination Chamber. The 2015 Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, which was originally, believe it or not, scheduled to be a simple house show, will be remembered not for the matches held inside the steel structure or the WWE title main event. No, Elimination Chamber 2015 will be remembered as the night that made Kevin Owens. In his first televised WWE main roster match, the NXT champion beats John Cena clean in the middle of the ring after 20 minutes of high drama and world-class action. Big Match John did everything possible to make Owens look like a big deal, and the match and result ensured that the hard-nosed brawler would hit the ground running in his WWE career. In other notable results, Ryback won the vacant Intercontinental Championship in a chamber match, outlasting R-Truth, King Barrett, Sheamus, Dolph Ziggler, and Mark Henry. It wasn't bowling shoe ugly, but it wasn't exactly a nice pair of ruby red stilettos either. Much more exciting was the tag team title chamber match featuring the New Day, the Ascension, the Lucha Dragons, Cesaro and Kid, Los Matadores, and the Primetime Players. The Triple Threat Divas title match was rushed and Neville vs. Bo Dallas was standard, but the show finished on a strong note with Dean Ambrose challenging Seth Rollins for the WWE title. The dusty finish cheapened it slightly, but you can't fault the action or the intent. Number 4, Hell in a Cell. From one bastardized steel structure to another, we move from the chamber to the cell for the 4th best WWE pay-per-view of 2015. The best was saved until last on the night, with Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker duking it out in the Devil's Playground, a rare example of a cell match in the PG era living up to its brutal reputation. Far different from their cell match 13 years prior, Taker and Lesnar both bled, used the cell, the ring steps, and even the exposed ring boards in a violent and exhausting match that was ultimately won by our Viking Space Lord and Savior, Brock Lesnar. Adding insult to injury, the Wyatt family came out after the match and chinned the knackered dead man before carrying him back to, I'm presuming, the Wyatt family compound. Bray was in action earlier in the evening, also in a cell match against Roman Reigns. This was another good cell match, full of hard work and big moves, and the requisite amount of hatred. Reigns won, naturally. In other newsworthy items, Alberto Del Rio returned to the company and successfully answered John Cena's US title open challenge, a concept that had been one of the highlights of the year and produced many standout matches. This one wasn't great, but it was a surprising moment and set the tone for the rest of the night. The New Day and the Dudleys had another decent enough match, Charlotte and Nikki Bella ditto. Seth Rollins tried hard in his WWE title match with Kane, but I don't think anyone was buying the Big Red Machine as a genuine threat at this stage of his career. Overall, the two cell matches make this one of the superior pay-per-views of the year, and there's enough to keep you engaged in between. Number 3, Money in the Bank. With 3 remarkable matches and no shortage of absolute mayhem, Money in the Bank 2015 is a rousing pay-per-view that does enough to land itself on the number 3 spot for the year. It began in typically hectic fashion with a 7-man Money in the Bank ladder match. Roman Reigns, Kane, Dolph Ziggler, Kofi Kingston, Randy Orton, Neville, and eventual winner Sheamus were tasked with setting the pace for the night, and they did not let us down. The next great match on the show was another blockbuster between John Cena and Kevin Owens, who were having themselves quite the rivalry by this point. More of the same here, with this one playing off their 2 previous pay-per-view matches brilliantly before Cena mustered up the strength to rise above hate and never give up to ultimately put away his nemesis. And in the main event, Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose had a wild and chaotic ladder match that descended into a fierce brawl with an inventive finish, both men falling off the ladder with the WWE title, but Rollins just managing to cling onto it longer. The rest of the show wasn't much cop, with a few shorter and unmemorable matches. Paige and Nikki Bella was probably the pick of the bunch, as Ryback and Big Show and the New Day vs. the Primetime Players were all over before they got a chance to really begin. Not too much to complain about though, as Money in the Bank is all about the 2 ladder matches and another helping of JC and KO. Delicious. Number 2, SummerSlam. With 10 matches and clocking in at around 4 hours in length, SummerSlam 2015 was epic in its size and scope. Not absolutely everything was a hit, but the second half of the show in particular was outstanding. And you know what? It had to be, one night after the NXT crew had put on a well-received masterclass in the same building. SummerSlam kicked into a higher gear with a tag match between Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns, Bray Wyatt, and Luke Harper. It was a frenzied brawl that gave the vocal Brooklyn crowd something to shout about. That was followed up with a marvelous winner-takes-all WWE and US title match between Cena and Rollins. This seesaw outing captivated right until the end, where Seth Rollins won the match by himself without any help or outside interference. Hey, look at that, my time machine works! Moving on, workhorses Cesaro and Kevin Owens delivered the goods as they are known to do. Watching this back, it's shameful that WWE didn't bother doing much more with the Swiss Superman. And the main event of The Undertaker vs. Brock Lesnar was a heated and super physical match that, again, was let down a little bit by the finish. Brock had made Taker tap out with a Kimura, but the referee didn't see it, and then the Phenom won the match with the Hell's Gate. Still, take nothing away from these two warhorses and the effort they put forth. On the undercard, Randy Orton and Sheamus had their dependably solid match. New Day won the tag team titles once again in a decent fatal four-way. The Ziggler, Lana, Rusev, Summer Rae saga trudged on. There was a long 9-woman triple threat tag team elimination match. Ryback beat Miz and Big Show in a match you never need to see. And Stephen Amell, star of television series Arrow, teamed with Neville to best King Barrett and Stardust in a cracking match by celebrity standards. Overall, SummerSlam looked and felt like a major event and had a little bit of something for everyone to enjoy. Yes, even you. Number 1, WrestleMania 31. The number 1 spot goes to the biggest show of the year, as WrestleMania lived up to the hype and delivered on just about every front. As well as being the peak of the wrestling year, WrestleMania 31 represented a peak in the resentment towards Roman Reigns, supposed golden boy and future face of the company. Everyone was expecting him to walk out of Levi's Stadium with the WWE title. He and Brock Lesnar were having a scintillating bout, with the Beast Incarnate taking the big dog on a trip to a little place called Suplex City, bitch, before Seth Rollins, who had lost to Randy Orton earlier in the night, the RKO finish to that one earning its place on the highlight reel forever, interfered and cashed in his Money in the Bank contract and curb stomped his way into the history books. A breathless end to what had been a great show that started fast and furious with a 7-man ladder match for the IC title. The hero of the previous year's WrestleMania, Daniel Bryan, came out on top and earned himself a WWE Grand Slam. Everyone involved, however, played their part, took their medicine, and came out of it looking good, even if they didn't leave with the strap themselves. Sting's first WWE match was more of a spectacle than a technical classic, as WWE revived the Monday Night Wars for one night only. The skirmish between DX and NWO members was a fun surprise, whereas Triple H predictably going over was not. Take that, evil billionaire Ted Turner! Another spectacle was the sight of Rusev and Lana entering the showcase of the Immortals in a tank. Anyone thinking that just because the faux Russian came in ready for a war meant he wouldn't job to John Cena clearly needs to learn a thing or two about rising above hate and never giving up. The core of Big Match John's belief system and the two things that allowed him to prevail on the grandest stage. The Undertaker, in his first match since the streak ended 1 year prior, managed a victory over fellow paranormal aficionado Bray Wyatt. The Bellas went down to Paige, and in her second last WWE appearance, AJ Lee in a short match. And UFC star Ronda Rousey got physical in an angle with Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and The Rock. That reaction for Ronda Rousey seemed to indicate she might be quite suited to this wrestling lark. Can you imagine?